Hi guys, I'm Sam. Welcome to my channel. Um, I just wanted to come on here today and talk about the strikes happening in entertainment, the alarming amount of scabs we're seeing, especially via social media, and the starving artist ideation that perpetuates things like scabs in the industry. Um, and so we're gonna just jump right into it, as they say. And so we'll start off with the Writers Guild. Essentially, the demands the Writers Guild of America is asking for at the moment are better pay, residuals for streaming. So essentially, there were residuals before, whereas when their show were to rerun on cable, they would get paid every time. And obviously, with the fall of cable, the rise of streaming, especially with streaming exclusives, they're no longer seeing that money and that income. And that's just not fair. Essentially, the companies are taking all their work, taking all their money. Um, Better staffing. So essentially, writers' rooms are shrinking to an absurd amount. They're losing needed and valued input, and they're losing out on job opportunities and AI safeguards, um, which essentially is just making sure their work and content isn't stolen and replicated by AI, because as we all know, AI cannot create, it can only imitate and use existing material. So those are the main demands that the Writers Guild is having at the moment for these companies, and essentially anything that falls under the NBA agreement. And the strike is still continuing as of July 24th, 2023, which means these demands have yet to be met. And there has yet to be an agreement happening between the Writers Guild and the companies they are striking against. So essentially, what is happening because of the Writers Guild strike, or what the strike is entailing, is that members of the Writers Guild cannot write for feature films or television from any of the struck companies, mostly Amazon, CBS, Warner Bros., Paramount, HBO, Netflix, and several more that I cannot name off the top of my head at the moment. So there's just lots of companies that you can't write for. However, it does not necessarily mean that these writers are out of work. There are several companies that have agreed to the demands and um, gotten interim waivers to continue their projects and continue their work, namely A24. I'm a huge horror fan, so shout out to A24 and their large support for the Writers Guild. So essentially, this strike just means you cannot interact, cannot work on any contracts or agreements, or even negotiate future contracts with the struck companies. The Writers Guild has asked for people who are not members to spread the word about the strike, especially via social media. Picket if they're able to, donate to the cause, and not to cross the picket line. Do not cross the picket line. Um, at this time, there's been no call for boycott of any properties, so you do not have to cancel your streaming services. You don't have to like avoid seeing movies in theaters or anything. Yeah, things you can do is write independently for anything with a waiver. And the strike does not affect members who are not under the MBA agreement. So it does not affect anyone in broadcast TV, radio, or streaming news, online media, nonfiction, television, or nonfiction podcast contracts. So those people are not being affected by the Writers Guild of America strike at the moment and can continue their work. So essentially just don't cross the picket line. If you're not a member, just don't cross the picket line. It's that easy. Now, moving on to the Screen Actors Guild American Federation for Television and Radio Artists, also known as SAG-AFTRA. They are currently on strike with the demands of increased pay, including relocation expenses, consent needed for AI replicas of actors, which I feel like is personally my biggest issue on here, because essentially the companies have not agreed that you shouldn't be able to produce AI replicas of actors and use them in film and television without the actor's consent. Essentially, they want to pay actors for less time and use their likeness for more time. Woohoo! Yeah, so that makes me very angry, and I feel like it's a very immoral practice happening at the moment. They're asking for residuals similar to the Writers Guild, residuals for streaming services. Um, They have asked for hair and makeup specialists for a variety of skin tones and hair textures. And they have also asked to be allowed for work on multiple projects. So this is essentially like another huge thing. Um, Actors, their pay looks way better than it is, especially background actors. For instance, it will say something like $900 a day, and you think, "Ah, that's great," until you keep into account that they are asked to relocate often. They are also held under contract for a long period of time, and they're often not allowed to work on other projects at this time. So you're only given that job, and you're not always working. You are held under contract, so you cannot work for any other projects, but you might only be needed like one day in a week or 2 weeks. And then that money is a lot less because you're being paid for $900 a day and then you're only working one day a week. And especially in the areas that you're working, New York and LA, that money is not going to cover anything. It's not going to cover your rent. And that's just a fact of the matter, especially with inflation. And these companies are not matching inflation. And so essentially what the strike entails is for union members, don't interact with struck companies or materials. You cannot act in anything with a struck company, but you can still act in independent projects or projects that have been given a waiver. The Actors Equity Association is not currently striking, so you're welcome to do live theater as well. And you can act in things like commercials and things like that. And where it gets a little more tricky is that you're not allowed to attend premieres for completed projects. Um, you cannot accept interviews based on these current projects, and you cannot promote anything that has a struck company. Where this gets a little more tricky again is that if you're a current, like for instance, if you're an influencer or content creator on a platform like YouTube, and you're already under contract, already under sponsorship to promote that material, you can uphold that contract because otherwise you will be legally responsible and SAG-AFTRA may not be able to help you in that notion. But if unless you are already under contract, you should not promote the material. You can still do things like movie reviews, of course, under your own self without paid promotion, but you shouldn't promote the material if you can avoid it. Um, Additionally, yeah, just don't cross picket lines. Don't cross picket lines. There's been no call for boycott of any material at the moment or any productions. Just don't cross picket lines. It's that easy. I would also like to take a second to shout out UPS, who will likely be going on strike shortly. Um, because UPS, the United Postal Service, deserves better pay and better working conditions. Shout out to the UPS. Woohoo. So we love the UPS, the United Postal Service. They totally deserve better working conditions and better pay. And if they do decide to go on strike, I will be fully supportive. But you'll notice there's not scabs or nearly as many scabs for things like the UPS. And so let's just jump right into the idea behind scabs. Scabs are people who willingly cross the picket line, specifically with the idea and notion to take jobs from the people who are picketing. So essentially, if let's say the mine workers are striking for $10 more an hour or $10 more for their pay, whatever, and then someone comes in and says, I'll do it for $5 more, that's a scab. They are willingly going against the strike to take someone else's job. Yeah. And so we're seeing a lot of scabs lately, especially on social media and platforms like TikTok, where people are promoting the idea of being a scab, especially for the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, because of course we are. And I would like to point to Colin Everett, who I'll be slicing some videos in every once in a while. Colin Everett, username is Colin Your Mom. Spelled like that. Um, we're gonna be using him as an example to delve into these bigger issues. I think I'm allowed to critique Colin because he is a known victim blamer for things like SA. And yeah, Colin Everett is a social media presence on TikTok and an aspiring actor who has blown up recently for attempting to very publicly cross picket lines. His main niche is Christian comedy and horror, to my knowledge, and he's seen a fair amount of success through this, especially on like his stand-up routines and on his TikTok account. I personally am not a fan, but I'm not his demographic, so we're not even going to go into it. Colin was allegedly offered a deal for a television show from an unnamed company.
I just got a potentially life-changing phone call. I got a message this morning from a guy at a company who said, hey, we would love to develop and fund a TV show starring you. You meaning me. His wife is the CEO, and apparently she loves my stuff. Like, they will literally pass my videos around the conference table and be like, okay, this guy is it. He said I have the it factor. I guess they keep calling me the next John Candy, or his wife was like, I didn't know John Candy and Carol Burnett had a freaking love child. Their platform is going to launch November 1st, so stay tuned. This is so exciting. How I know that they're serious is just with the budget that they quoted me that they're going to use for each episode. The budget per episode is like a lot. So they want to fly me out to Las Vegas and do some guest appearances and other shows that they have going on, kind of as a promotional thing for my show. But over the next few months, we're going to start developing a freaking TV show for me. Like, what? I was just saying on a live stream recently that I would love to be like Jerry Seinfeld, Ray Romano, Kevin James, and have their own TV shows. And this is my opportunity.
And he voiced that in a video before making this comment.
So I was like, since the writers are striking, I might have an in. Let's just say.
Was essentially saying that he was very willing to take writers and actors' jobs and cross the picket line, making him a scab. After this, and after being called out for this, he doubled down on this claim multiple times.
I didn't. The CEO of the company compared me to John Candy and Carol Burnett, which you probably don't even know who that is. But anyways, hope you're listening next time. See this thing? You vet.
Often stating that he did not care that he was scabbing or if he was a scab. And then he ultimately retracted this statement, saying that he did not know what he was talking about and was under false assumptions and false information.
I'm going to be quoted in the New York Times for what I've been saying on here. So, I wanted to come on here and apologize for stating myself so poorly. A lot of my information was not even correct.
So why is this important? Colin is the person who made me focus in on this issue, and he's also one of many, many people who think it's okay to cross picket lines if offered a deal. The situation is unique to performers and writers as there's an instant connection between the job and fame and the job and success. It's still a job. Acting and writing are still jobs. These people are employees and these people are human beings. They are not these otherworldly things that just love to create and act. These famous, fancy Hollywood jobs don't matter anymore when you can't pay for food or for your rent. Your job's no longer some woohoo Hollywood dream when you're starving and on the street while still working. And additionally, it's not the famous rich Hollywood actors that we're supporting here with this strike. It's the smaller actors, the background actors, the people who are successful in their field. You have to be successful to join the union. And so they're working and they're not making enough money to live on while working because their conditions are currently that bad. And we're trying to fix that. It's not like We're supporting the Robert Downey Jr.'s of the world. We're supporting background actors and cameos and minor actors, um, and child actors who are blatantly not being paid for their work right now. There's oftentimes that children and even regular actors are paid for exposure and then are expected to take that as if it's not still a job and they don't need money to survive. We can't live off of our passion and love of theater and film. And the same goes for writers. You have to be decent, you have to find decent success to join this union. They can't survive off their passion and love of writing. They need to be paid for the writing that is being used. It's not like these are some out of work people. These people are working. They are working. They're in the industry. And I feel like that's where the confusion is happening, and that's why people think it's okay to scab. But it's not. It's not okay at all. And even more so, these people are under constant pressure and threat to lose their jobs to AI and even AI replicas of themselves and their own writing and their own work. It's not like they're just going to lose it to a manufacturing machine that can do it faster and better. No, they're losing it to a robot, a computer that's specifically designed to replicate their own work in their selves. Not okay. That's not okay. Um, so don't cross the picket line. Don't cross the picket line. And if that whole morality angle didn't get you, it's a stupid idea. Like, from a business perspective and branding yourself as a business, you'll never work union again. You'll never work union again. You'll be blacklisted from the industry, and all those people who you want to collab with won't, because you crossed a picket line. Because you crossed a picket line. Um, they will literally pay you for half a day and then use an AI clone of your likeness. This is a legitimate issue, which is part of the strike. You won't be able to collaborate. It's just bad business. It's bad business. You'll be blacklisted. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't post on social media how you would do it if someone offered it to you. Just don't do it. Plain and simple. Thank you. Um, and so now let's talk about the idea behind the starving artist, because that's another big idea behind why people don't care as much about these strikes or are willing to scab and cross picket lines. There's been this long held idea that true art is birthed from suffering. It's an absolutely idiotic idea made by white men, endorsed by white men, and then continued to be endorsed by rich white men who like to pretend they struggled really hard for their artwork. Um, Not to actor bash right now, but I'm gonna focus in on method actors as a main example of this. Method actors are often hailed as better actors for their dedication, even though it often involves horrific things like starving themselves, giving themselves EDs, physically hurting themselves, or the infamous dead rat thing with Jared Leto. And society eats it up. Why? Because it's interesting. Moreover, it's a practice ingrained in the patriarchy and white privilege. Female actors and or non-male presenting, non-mask presenting actors um can't get away with this. If you're not white, if you're a person of color, you can't get away with method acting or you're labeled as crazy because no one method acts to play Joe from the grocery store, you know? No one method acts to be a normal person when they're like playing a normal character. I can't think of a single time. And so they're labeled as crazy unless you're a white man and you would go to jail. And this same principle behind method acting can be applied in a less insane and less extreme way to our real life treatment of actors. There's this inherent idea that in acting, if you are truly dedicated to your art and your craft, you should suffer for it, and it should not matter that you are paid. It should not matter that you have enough money to live on, because you are doing it in the name of art. This is why companies get away with not paying actors or paying them based on exposure, even though that exposure is often minimal at best and not guaranteeing you any more work in the industry. Even more, it's ludicrous. It's essentially asking an actor to forfeit their body and their health in exchange for their job. It's still a job. Then, when an actor complains about their treatment in the industry, they are criticized for choosing that industry, as if they were supposed to know exactly what they were getting into before signing up for it, after being fed years and years of survivor bias and glamorized legends of if you try hard enough, you'll be rich and famous, which is just plain old not true. Um, Plus, these are people in the union, once again, meaning that they have had success in their field. They're not out of work at people. These are people who are working. It's not like your neighbor Stacy who goes to New York and wants to be an actress and then ends up as a waitress. No, these are people who are in the industry also having to work second jobs and third jobs to pay their rent to continue working in this industry. These same ideas can be applied directly to the Writers Guild, um, where it's expected that if a writer truly stands by their art and their work and their writing, they'll stand by it till death and let the message carry its legacy, their legacy. Even more ridiculous. It's once again, say it with me, still a job. They deserve to be paid for doing their job. It's simple. It's so simple. Um, and they're literally about to be unable to have a means to produce their art or get their message out as computers are replicating them. And I know some people think this point's ridiculous because AI could never replicate the soul and feeling of a human's writing, of course, of course. Except that AI is getting smarter and getting better. It cannot create anything original, but it can do more reruns and it can do more reboots. So if you don't want to see more and more reboots and soulless writing pieces that we're currently seeing a wave of, support the Writers Guild, support the strike. Their lack of pay is justified on the grounds that they are doing something they enjoy, but it's not as if they don't pour their time and effort and work into it. Plenty of scientists love their job, and if they went unpaid for it, like, can you imagine? There would be a riot, and rightfully so. But people view it differently because the arts are viewed as less, and it's viewed as a lesser career. It's viewed as this glamorized, fame hungry thing when that's not what the arts is, and that's not what the industry is supposed to be. But it's what it's currently made out to be, and that's because of the large companies. Like back in the olden days, let's say, let's use that fun phrase, it wasn't like this, and I understand that that's because of the rapid capitalization of our country as a whole and the rapid rates of inflation and everything like that. But it was a much more unique practice in itself, and it wasn't so based on this idea that you had to starve and claw and suffer in order to be great or in order to be successful. Um, So that's that. That's all my thoughts on strikes, scabs, and the starving artist, or at least for the moment. I essentially want to sum this up by reminding everyone that the WGA and SAG AFTRA are not the multimillionaires. They are fighting against the multimillionaires, and it benefits absolutely no one, not even yourself in the future, to cross picket lines that are made to ensure living conditions. And it does not help you to go kiss the ass of faceless corporations that do not give a shit if their employees live or die or have enough money for rent or food or health insurance. Okay. So that's that. Don't cross picket lines. Thanks.